Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Payoff Pitch. My name is Joey Olberding. You are listening to 95.7 MRC, and I will be your host for all things sports. Okay, so on this edition of the Payoff Pitch, something that I think will be important to talk about is all the major sports right now. Today is a Monday here in October, and today the World Series is starting. Yeah, that's right, between the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I have to say, throughout these episodes of the Payoff Pitch that I've been filming, something very apparent that a lot of people will notice, and it's pretty obvious, is that I have a deep love of baseball. You know, the World Series and the playoffs in general are just fun for me, because, you know, it goes over that entire thing, and just kind of shows, oh yes, these were the best teams throughout the entire year. And it's just amazing to see the two best teams in the league facing each other. Of course, some of the times a team might get lucky or a big injury might happen. But in this case, in the 2017 World Series, that is not the case at all. We had the two best teams from both leagues squaring out, and that never happens. That almost never happens, and that's just what makes this such a unique experience, honestly, in the major leagues today. So we have the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Dodgers facing off. The Houston Astros from the AL and the Los Angeles Dodgers from the NL. Now, both teams have had their fair share of ups and downs. The Dodgers more so. The Astros have more so been kind of just doing well the entire time. And you may be asking to yourself, what makes these two teams the best in the league? How can you be so sure? Well, the thing about both the NL and the AL is there are a lot of good teams. More so in the AL, but the thing about the Dodgers is they're in the best division in the league right now. Of course, you have Los Angeles themselves, who are an amazing team almost all throughout the year until they had that crazy losing streak back in August. But other than that, they were amazing. Justin Turner, Clayton Kershaw, of course. You know, you had some amazing talent there. You know, a lot of guys doing well that nobody expected to, like Chris Taylor. There were just a lot of really good guys that played well. A lot of guys that you wouldn't think no real superstars on that team aside from Kershaw and Kenley Jansen and some pitchers. But there was no real offensive, amazing stuff there, which is kind of the weird thing about it. There are no really clear superstars on offense, yet I'm calling them the best team in the entire NL. That goes through a lot of teams, so let me just go over it like this. In the NL West, you have the Dodgers, but you also have the Rockies and the Diamondbacks. Those are two incredible teams. Teams that would win their divisions if they didn't play in the NL West. The Diamondbacks having Paul Goldschmidt, Zach Greinke, Paul Goldschmidt really leading that club. And then during the trade deadline, they got J.D. Martinez, another really good bat, and A.J. Pollock. You know, I could go on, but you get the point. Really good team. And on the other side, or the same side, you have the Colorado Rockies. And a lot of people don't like the way the Rockies play because they play in Coors Field. You know, Coors Field is a very easy part to hit home runs because of the elevation and the air and all that stuff. So it's a lot easier to hit home runs and not pitcher friendly. But then you look at the Rockies and they have one of the best ERAs in the league, even playing in Coors Field. Not to mention they have a super amazing offense, and both of them meshed together, of course, make an incredible team. Now, their offense isn't the craziest offense ever. They have some really good players, that much is apparent, but they're not really huge home run hitters, even though they play in a huge home run park. Their biggest home run hitter is probably Charlie Blackmon, but a lot of guys can hit home runs there. It's just that not everybody's going to hit a million of them. And yeah, and then you have teams like the Cubs, the Brewers. Then you have teams in the NL East, the Mets, who got really unlucky this year, and the Washington Nationals. You can't say that, the NL isn't really impressive, but still, the Diamondbacks just doing amazing all year. June was a really good month for them, while August wasn't as much, but they had their ups and downs. Well, in the AL, there are a ton of good teams, like a ton. All these teams were vying for a wild card spot, and every team at a point almost got it. But throughout it all, the Astros were a clear division winner. They were doing great throughout the entire year, from start to finish, doing just amazing. And there was no real competition for them either. The AL West is another good division, but still nobody could catch the Astros. I mean, you have the Mariners, who have been a good team, for years, and they've never just been able to make that push to get into the playoffs since 2001, which is really unfortunate because they've had some good teams, and this year was just another example. Yeah, they have a lot of good teams. The Texas Rangers, they have a lot of offense. They have pretty good pitching. They have Cole Hamels, a lot of good players there. There are just a lot of good teams in the AL West that don't really get as much recognition as others, and it's kind of unfortunate. I shouldn't say recognition, I mean more like a sort of justice, because much like the NL West, even though those two teams I mentioned before in the NL West both got playoff spots being wild cards, like I said, in any other division they probably would have won it. Any other division except for the AL West, because as I said earlier, the Astros are definitely the best team in the AL. And there, like I keep mentioning, there are a lot of other great teams. The AL East has a lot of great teams too. You have the Red Sox, you have the Yankees, all the teams. The Rays are really good this year, like surprisingly. That surprised a lot of people. Yeah, and the AL Central, Cleveland Indians, the Royals were in it, the Twins were in it, and they made a wild card spot too, along with the Yankees. The Twins did. And this is going to be one of the best World Series, since last year. Last year was the most amazing World Series that you can really say happened in a long time, but this one is going to be up there too, because it really is the two best teams in their respective leagues. Last year, it was very well the same thing, too. Both teams were really good. The Chicago Cubs, they were a young team, but really good. And the Cleveland Indians, who were a little bit older, but still very good. And now you have the Los Angeles Dodgers, who only have a few years more of contention, really, before They have some aging guys. Their team consists of 29, 32 guys that are going to be good for a few years after this, but after that they might start getting a little worse. But the Dodgers always have a ton of money, and they can always get back in it. The Astros, however, are considerably younger than the Dodgers. They're full of much younger guys, more like 27-year-olds. And 28-year-olds, maybe even 26-year-olds. They're still in Houston, but they still don't have that money that the Yankees or the Dodgers or any teams like that have. But they do have a lot of talent, and they've built that up over the years. I remember back in 2012, 2013, worst team in the league. Worst team, without a doubt. But now, you could call them the best team in the league, without a doubt. Now, I would say that there is doubt there, but I guess that's what the World Series is for. There are no real injuries on either side. It's just great baseball between two teams. And this brings up my point. In the World Series, I have my predictions. Now, this is what I think is going to happen. Like I just mentioned earlier, you could make the case that the Astros are the best team in the league, and that could very well be true, and I think that is true. So I think that the Astros are going to win the 2017 World Series in 7 games, 4-3 against the Dodgers. I think Justin Verlander, who pitched amazing for them against the Yankees just earlier in the ALCS, that's going to happen again. Justin Verlander is going to do amazing again. Justin Verlander looks like a new Justin Verlander. He looks like 2012 Justin Verlander, 2011 Justin Verlander, 2014 Justin Verlander. Yeah, Justin Verlander had some amazing years. 2007, he looks like all of those. And he just got swapped to a new team over the trade deadline, going from the Detroit Tigers to the Houston Astros. The Tigers, of course, are kind of in more of a rebuilding stage at the moment, and that's why they got rid of one of their best pitchers in a long time. But yeah, I think with the bat of Jose Altuve, who's been doing amazing, by the way, all postseason, and he isn't really getting the recognition he deserves because, oh my goodness, he is really leading the charge for that team. Yeah, but I think with that, they'll do great. I'm not saying that the Dodgers are going to do horrible. Oh, no way. I think Clayton Kershaw is going to do great, and I think Justin Turner and other smaller guys that you don't expect to do amazing in the postseason, guys that really haven't had a chance to prove themselves in the postseason, like Kike Hernandez just a few days ago. He had 3 home runs against the Cubs. 3. And have you heard of Kike Hernandez? Chances are you haven't, because he's not a star player. But still, given the opportunity, he was able to show how good he is. This has happened a few times over the past few years. In the 2014 World Series, with the Giants facing the Royals, who else but Travis Ishikawa? He, just a bench player, kind of going between AAA and the majors. He hit a 3-run bomb to give them the lead in the bottom of the 8th, the Giants, which really was huge for that World Series. And that World Series, I do believe, went to 6 games, and that was important. That was important. And so I'm saying both teams are going to have a great World Series, but in the last game, the Astros are going to win. They are going to win because of whoever's pitching. They have a very strong staff and a very strong offense, and the Dodgers do too. The Dodgers are both a really consistent team and an inconsistent team. How are they consistent and how are they inconsistent? They always have a surprise bat that can fool you. You expect somebody not to be able to do something, they will be able to do it, and their pitching is awesome. But their inconsistency is when one thing falls apart, it all falls apart. It's very important that everything with the Dodgers is going great, and the Astros have weapons in order to expose those weaknesses, and I think that's how they're going to win this World Series. And I think you're going to see this throughout the next at least 4 days. I think you'll be able to see that. Okay, so that was my opinion on the MLB. And I'm going to move on. And I'm going to talk about the NBA. Now, the NBA season started back up about like a week about a week ago at this point. I figured that I may as well make my postseason predictions now, because everybody else is going to be doing it, and I may as well do it too. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, it's just going to be Warriors-Cavaliers in the finals again. And it very well may be. I'm not about to say that that's not going to happen, because I believe that it will be Warriors and Cavaliers again. Is it going to be quite as simple as last year? Like, not full of competition, the Spurs didn't do all too much, there was nobody in the East? No, I heavily disagree. I think that the West is going to be way closer this time. I think that the Warriors are still going to get the 1 seed, but I think that it's going to be better all around, and I think that there will be competition in the East, because teams are building more and more, and they're getting better and better, and I think that they're just going to be better and better and better and better and better. Yeah, all these teams are improving. These teams in both are steadily building super teams, whether it's more obvious or not as obvious. Like, the Warriors were an example of kind of a more subtle super team building. The one guy that you can say that they got when they first formed that super team, or two guys, was Andrew Bogut. Andrew Bogut really started the Warriors getting good, but they drafted most of their players, or getting smaller players from other teams that grew into stars. Like, they drafted Steph Curry, they drafted Klay Thompson, they drafted Draymond Green. Actually, they might not have, but they got a lot of smaller guys from trades, which could just be an example, like Draymond Green. A lot of smaller guys who developed into superstars. But that's the thing. The contrast to that is the Cavaliers. They had one or two guys that were a draft, like Tristan Thompson, and the person who's not on the Cavaliers anymore, Kyrie Irving, who's on the Celtics. But most of it was getting it with money, because you get LeBron over, and all of a sudden you have somebody that everybody wants to flock to. People flocked to Miami when he went to the Heat. People didn't really flock to him when he was in Cleveland before, because he was still kind of a player who you couldn't really, that didn't really have enough experience and didn't really have enough pieces around him, so that if one person just went to that team, they would automatically be amazing. That wasn't the way it was going to go. But with LeBron James back in Cleveland, and having Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving there, people said, whoa. Even just before Kevin Love was there, just having Kyrie Irving and LeBron James on the same team, everybody was like, whoa. Because the East at that time, they really didn't have a lot of people. I remember, I think the first or second year of that Cavaliers team, the Hawks were the team to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I'm not saying that the Hawks are bad or anything, but this was before the Cavaliers had a lot of their pieces. They didn't have Kyle Korver yet. He was still on the Hawks. They didn't have Jarrett Jack yet. They were still kind of a base super team. They were still a super team, and they were still amazing, but they weren't quite that amazing. That year, I do believe that they lost to the Warriors in the finals. That was the first or second year they lost to the Warriors. I think it's the first. Yeah, it was the first. But they didn't have a lot of pieces there. And people noticed this, and they said, hey, we can make your team even better if you add us. And the Cavaliers, with the money that they get, did. And that's how they got better and better. And now they're here as the definitive team in the East. Yeah, but going back to what I was saying, having the Hawks in the Eastern Conference Finals, they're not a bad team, but they're not a great team. There was no way, if they somehow managed to beat the Cavaliers, that they would be able to beat the Warriors, or the Spurs, or the Thunder, or any of these teams, the Grizzlies even, the Rockets. There's no way you're going to beat them. There's just no way. The Hawks have a few good players, but nobody who you can really say is crazy good. I mean, Paul Millsap, he's good. He's a very good power forward, but he's not great. Al Horford, he's a very good center. He gets rebounds, he gets points, but he doesn't stand out. He isn't a person that people want to build around. Who, if you get Paul Millsap and Al Horford together, nobody's going to want to flock to that team, because they don't stand out over everybody else. They're very good, don't get me wrong, and everybody recognizes that. But there's a difference between being very good and recognizing it, and being great and having people wanting to be on your team. Being very good doesn't make a great team in the making. Having two great players on a team doesn't make a great team. Just look at the Pelicans last year. Last year, the Pelicans had Anthony Davis, and in the offseason, they traded Tyreek Evans and a bunch of other younger guys for DeMarcus Cousins. And immediately, if you remember what I said back a few months ago when that happened, I said, this is not going to work. The Pelicans really want this to work, and they believe it will. but chemistry is important, and being able to know what two pieces can fit together is important. Now, people flock to the Cavaliers because LeBron James knows how to handle a team. He's practically the coach of the Cavaliers at this point. He's practically leading the team. And I say practically, but he's pretty much literally leading the team. He's like a player coach, as close to a player coach as you'll find in the NBA today. And you can really see that if you just look. If you just look, you can see that. And people want to go to a great coach who goes to the finals every year, who's also the best player in the league. Well, people don't want to go to Al Horford. Which would you rather go to? Exactly. Now, I'm just saying that, yes, I think it's going to be Warriors-Cavaliers in the finals again. But there's going to be more competition. There are more people who look at the Warriors and the Cavaliers, more players in the NBA, and say, I want to put a stop to this. I want to show why my team is the best team. So people out there, media people, won't say, oh, it's just going to be Warriors and Cavaliers again, because it won't next year. This year, however, it's going to be Warriors and Cavaliers again. Why? Because there are so many teams trying to get better and get really good that they're almost trying to just get a seed with some really good teams. Like, I made a bracket for what I think the NBA postseason will be like. And in the West, I said that the Clippers would be the 8th seed. Now, I don't like the Clippers. I'll admit that. But you can't say that the Clippers don't have a good team. They have Blake Griffin. They've always had DeAndre Jordan. And now with that trade from the Rockets that got Chris Paul to the Rockets, they got a lot of pieces in return, a lot of underrated pieces that many people don't know about. And I've mentioned this before, but Lou Williams, earlier last year, he had gotten traded from the Lakers to the Rockets, and I said, this is an important piece. Lou Williams is the best player on the Lakers at that moment, and now that he's going back to LA, I think it's apparent to say that's still true. He was still the best player on the Lakers, and he's still a really underrated player for the Rockets. And I think that'll only do good for the Clippers, and I think you'll see that this year, along with a lot of other guys that are already there. You basically, it's just the Clippers without Chris Paul and a few more pieces added. But I put them as the 8th seed. Why is such a good team with so many pieces being the 8th seed? Because there's so many others too. It's not like it's just the Clippers there. A few years ago, it would have been Clippers Warriors it would have been the Clippers as the 5 seed, or the 4 seed, or even the 3 seed, with the Warriors being the 2 seed, maybe the 4 seed, 3 seed, with the Spurs being the 1 seed. But even the Spurs weren't really what you would call a super team. They had some really good players. They had Tim Duncan, of course, Kawhi Leonard, and Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili, and some really good players. But they weren't a super team, because at that point, Tim Duncan was the superstar, and Kawhi Leonard was still kind of budding. Tony Parker is good. Manu Ginobili, aging, getting a little worse. It's not a super team, but it's a great team. There's a difference. But there's so many teams vying to be a super team that are really trying to push themselves into a new plane of being great. The team that hasn't really tried to do that and is trying to build for the future with younger guys like DeAndre Jordan, and Blake Griffin's still pretty young, is the Clippers. They're playing for the future while everybody else is playing for now. They want to be better now, and if it doesn't work, they'll try it next year. But the Clippers know that they won't be able to contend for a title this year. But they see their players, and they see that they have a real shot. Lou Williams, he's 28. Blake Griffin, he's like 27. DeAndre Jordan, he's like 25. Those are still young, good players. Blake Griffin is a superstar. DeAndre Jordan, he's great. I'm not sure I could call him a superstar, but he's really, really good. Lou Williams, I keep on saying it, he's one of the most underrated players in the league. So with that, they're a very good team. And being in the West, there's a lot of competition, so they have to settle for being an 8 seed, even though in the East, they could probably be a 5 seed. Now, going off the topic of the East is really good too. With the West having all these great teams like the Thunder, the Timberwolves, the Rockets, all those teams trying to ascend into where the Warriors and the Cavaliers are. In the East, there's the same thing. I mentioned earlier how Kyrie Irving went to the Celtics, and that's still true. But Gordon Hayward, on the first game of the year, out for the season, and that's just painful for the Celtics, because now the Celtics don't have. It's not a super team anymore. Without Gordon Hayward on your team, it's not a super team. It's a good team. Goes back to what I was saying about the Clippers just a minute ago. They have good players. They have good players surrounding Kyrie Irving, but good players surrounding one player doesn't make them a super team. And if you're not a super team, you can't take on the Warriors and the Cavaliers. Now, other teams, I'm not saying that if you're not a super team, you can't be able to fight. You can't be able to face the super teams and not be able to have a shot. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you're not a super team, you will not be able to be such a legendary team. Legendary team. That's a good way of putting it. A legendary team is a super team. The 2012 Miami Heat will go down as legendary. The 1989 Lakers, legendary. The old Celtics teams from the 1960s, legendary, with Bill Russell and all those guys. Those were super teams. And that's the best way of putting it. They're legendary. But you don't look at the 2008 Cavaliers and say they're a super team because they just have LeBron James. Or you don't look at any of the other teams that survived with one player like Chris Webber or some other really good player, Charles Barkley. You don't look at them as a super team. You can look at the 2005 Suns as a super team if you wanted to, because they have Steve Nash, they have Sean Marion, they have some very good players on that team that were superstars at the time, but you don't look at the 1995 Suns under the same light because they just had Charles Barkley. You see what I'm saying here? I'm saying that if you go to the finals with a team like the Celtics do now, then you will not be remembered. You will not go down in history, and you will not. And the thing, if you want to get into the NBA Hall of Fame, you need a ring. And if you just go to the finals and you're able to make it past the Cavaliers or the Warriors or whatever, and you're not a super team, and if you somehow manage to get past the super team after that, you could make the case that you would be an underdog. Like a crazy underdog, like, whoa, they overcame the odds, amazing. And you could go down as legendary for that, but you would not go down as legendary for your actual team. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, but the East has a lot of good teams, a lot of very good teams, but nothing that can surpass the Cavaliers, in my opinion. A lot of teams that look like they can be great one day are the Bucks. The Bucks look like they can be amazing. Giannis Antetokounmpo, I really can't pronounce his last name, I'm sorry. But with the Greek Freak and a very young team, they just look great. They look great. And the 76ers, so many young guys, but the thing about them and the Lakers is that we haven't seen the potential yet. And I don't think the Lakers can get to the postseason. I think Lonzo Ball is going to not do well this year. He may do well in future years, but this year is not his year. Because the Western Conference is so packed full of amazing teams that's just not how it's going to work. But the 76ers, I think they do have a shot. They can make the postseason. I think they definitely can. Joel Embiid, we've already seen how great he is. Markelle Fultz. There are a lot of very good players on that team, but we just have to see how they do. I put them as the 8th seed. They could very well be the 6th seed, or they could very well be the 7th seed. But I think with as many good things that's going to happen with 76ers this year, of which there will be quite a few, I think there will be just as, or maybe a little less, problems, because these are such young guys. You don't know how they're going to do. And the coaching kind of reflects that, because you're working with all these guys, and you can work as much with them in practice, but you don't know how they're actually going to do in the game without actually seeing them. And that's kind of the thing I want to say about this. There are a lot of very good teams, but little experience. That's the same thing in the West. I'm going to name off teams which I think have experience. The Warriors, the Clippers, but they're worse. The Spurs, they only have really Kawhi Leonard at this point. The Grizzlies, they've been very good basically the entire time. They've been Mike Conley and Marc Gasol. They've been very good during that time span, but I don't think that will change this year, and that's all in the West. Every other team has some new player or some new something that makes them different. Now, you could say that trading Chris Paul away from the Clippers makes them a different team, and that's true. But those other teams I mentioned, they've made little to no changes, and they look the same. But they also somehow look better, even if they lost a player or two, or maybe just stayed the same. There are so many teams without any experience in the NBA right now that experience really matters. So many young players who don't really know what they're doing. I put the Grizzlies as the 7 seed here, but I think they can very well be a 5 because they just have experience, and they've been great for so many years, but never ever been able to make that jump. And this year, they may not be able to do it either. This year, but they certainly are a great team that has a great squad and has been able to do very well for the past few years. And I think that experience will just make them better this year. In the East, I think that the Cavaliers, of course, the Raptors are a big one, because the Raptors, they've had the same core group for the past few years and have done really well with that group. They've shown a ton of potential, but like I keep saying, they've never been able to make that jump. This year, they can do that. I think this is the year where they can make that jump. Can they beat the Cavaliers? Maybe. Can they beat the Warriors? No. They can't. They can beat one team, but they can't beat the other. Because if they're going to beat one team, it's going to go to 7 or 6 games. And you're going to need an injury for that to happen if you want to beat either one of those super teams. And that's the way it's worked for the past few years with those two. You hope for an injury. That's the way that you get past a team like this. But that doesn't always apply. You're not going to expect the Lakers to beat both the Warriors and the Cavaliers right now, when they just have no injuries. They have their core group of guys. You don't expect that to happen in a huge playoff series spanning possibly 7 NBA games. Moving on, the Heat are an interesting one. I think the Heat, they've had about 2 years of experience with their guys. Dion Waiters, Goran Dragic. They've had the same. They made a few changes, but they have kept quite a few of the same guys, and they've gotten better and better each year. And I put the Raptors as the 3 seed, and I put the Heat as the 6 seed. You could flip that, or you could put both of those teams on any one of the seeds. Maybe not the 1 seed, but they could be on the 1 seed. Maybe the Raptors could be on the 1 seed, but I don't think the Heat can. The Heat's best, I think, would be the 3 seed. The Raptors could be anything. The Raptors, it depends on injuries, and it depends on what happens during the regular season and how the rest of the teams stack up. The Heat, I think it's pretty clear what's already going to happen to them. They're going to have a surprisingly good year, and once again, people are going to be like, whoa, I did not expect the Miami Heat to do that well. And now they're between a 3 seed and an 8 seed. They're going to make the playoffs. But the only question is what seed they're going to be. But I definitely think with the group of guys around them, they're not even a great team. But man, they are an underdog. And I think that's just going to be what happens. I think They have the potential to be a great team, but they still have not gotten there. But the East is weak enough so that they can still make the playoffs. The Wizards are another one. The Wizards are a lot like the Heat, but they are better. They're better than the Heat. John Wall is one of the best players in the league, and he's surprisingly underrated for how great he is. Bradley Beal, another really underrated player who just flies under the radar because he plays in the East and doesn't play for the Cavaliers. The same thing happens with Damian Lillard in the West. He specifically stated he didn't want to join a super team, and he flies under the radar because of that, because he's not on some great team. And the same happened with Gordon Hayward back when he was on the Jazz, back when the Jazz weren't that good. Nobody noticed him because he didn't play on a great team. But I think that can change. I definitely think that can change. It's very possible. That's it. That's all the teams I predict will be going to the NBA playoffs that have some experience. That's about a 45 to 55 ratio, maybe even less. All these other teams are making big changes and want to be that super team by adding the best group of players around them. But like I mentioned earlier, that doesn't always mean you have chemistry. Chemistry is very important in the NBA. Like I mentioned earlier with my example of the Pelicans last year. The Pelicans look like they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. And they very well may be. They might be worse than the Suns. They might be a bit better than the Suns. We'll see. We will see with that team. Because it's really interesting to look at teams like that believed in the super team aspect by trading everything for another great player and seeing that fail. And I think you can look at the Celtics as just another example of this. They're still a good team without Gordon Hayward, but they're a good team. I put them here as the 7 seed. The 7 seed because they didn't have one guy. Because all their other guys, they may still be there, but without Isaiah Thomas, it's a different team. With Isaiah Thomas being on the Cavaliers, that not only can make the Cavaliers better, they already also have Dwayne Wade on there, but you lose that chemistry. And we just have to see how that chemistry progresses. It could very well be that the Celtics could be the 1 seed again, and I could be completely wrong. That could definitely happen. But the way I see it now, without Gordon Hayward, that won't happen. The same happens with the Bulls. The Bulls still have 1 or 2 good players. They have Nikola Mirotic. They still have some other guys on the Bulls, but without Jimmy Butler, who went to the Timberwolves, they are a different team. And their coaching is kind of crazy right now. And I don't predict that it'll do well at all. The Bulls will also be one of the worst teams in the league because they just don't have anybody. And the thing is, they're not even rebuilding either. They are in a situation where they're kind of in a weird limbo. And you see teams go through that limbo time after time after time where they're an okay team. They're a good team. They're an okay team. But they can never do better. You can see how super teams never work. Look at the MLB. Look at the Chicago White Sox. Year after year after year, they try to build a super team. They try to get very good players to play on there. I remember 2014, they got Adam LaRoche, they got Melky Cabrera. They had very good players on that team. They had Chris Sale manning the rotation, and they were the worst team in the AL Central. Why? Because you need a backup plan. Adam LaRoche got injured. Everything fell apart. The chemistry didn't work. Everything fell apart. You need to plan these things out before you make a decision, and that's what's so amazing about the Warriors and the Cavaliers, as I keep on mentioning. The Cavaliers have exceptional chemistry. Exceptional. The Warriors have even better chemistry. And that's chemistry, I swear, it travels through all these NBA teams, and that's what makes them great. The Spurs are just another example of a team with amazing how they were able to win an NBA Finals against the Miami Heat and able to do that. And yeah, the Warriors and the Cavaliers, how did they go to finals after finals after finals? Because they have chemistry, I swear. It's all about chemistry. How did the Celtics last year? How were they the 1 seed in the East? because they had even better chemistry than the Cavaliers. Isaiah Thomas and Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart and Kelly Olynyk and those guys, they had chemistry. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that's how they were able to beat the Cavaliers. And that may also be the way that the Hawks went to the Eastern Conference Finals a few years ago, as I mentioned a little while back, from chemistry. And the thing about, and my takeaway, my payoff pitch for this, is the fact that NBA teams may look great on paper, but without proper relationships between the players, it doesn't matter at all. Okay, and this will be our last topic for the day, but it's a Monday, so Sunday football, week 7 just happened. I decided, after what we've seen from these teams, that it would be fair to look at the playoff picture. And I know I just talked about the playoff picture with the NBA, but the NFL is another interesting situation. The thing I can immediately say that makes it so interesting is the teams this year. The injuries. What's happened with the teams? I remember last year the New York Giants did surprisingly well. This year, everybody's injured. Odell Beckham. All their wide receivers are injured, and their running game is still abysmal. And there's no way that they're going to win anything. They're not going to the playoffs at all this year. But there were other teams that also have that injury that I don't predict will be making the playoffs. The Packers are another example. Because of Aaron Rodgers' huge injury, I don't think there's any way that they are going to survive. And yeah, I mean, I think that teams that you wouldn't predict that would be doing well are doing well. It's like the opposite of the NBA. I think that the Eagles are one of the best teams in the league. The Rams are one of the best teams in the league. Nobody would have expected that at the start of the year. They would have expected Patriots. They're still a very good team. They're still one of the most amazing teams in the league, but they're not the best. And neither is the Packers, as I just mentioned. And that just goes on and on and on, and it keeps going and keeps going. Yeah, and I put here that the Chiefs, another one of the best teams in the league, and they came out of nowhere. Nobody would have expected week 1 Alex Smith would be able to beat Tom Brady. Week 1, nobody would have expected that. Nobody. So I'm just going to give you my playoff picture. I think that in the AFC, the Steelers are going to win the AFC North. Bengals, no way. Just looking at how they performed against the Steelers this week, there's no way. The Ravens, they're not even a good team. They're just okay. The AFC North is just not a good division right now. So that's how the Steelers are going to be able to win. Not necessarily because they're a great team, but because they're good enough. And I think that on the other side, the Patriots are going to win their division. And they're going to be the 2 seed, with the Broncos being the 1 seed. I think that the Broncos or the Chiefs, I think either one could be the 1 seed, honestly. Broncos or Chiefs, either way, one of them is going to be the 1 seed. But it's probably more likely that the Chiefs would be the 1 seed. The Patriots should be the 2 seed. I think this is an unpopular opinion, but the Bills will be that 6th seed in the NFL playoff pictures. I think that the Bills are better than the Ravens, and I think that they're better than the majority of teams in the AFC, and that is an unpopular opinion. But that's just how I feel about them, and I think that they can do well. I think that they can beat the Steelers. Yes. I think that they can beat the Steelers in the wild card game, and I firmly believe that. They just are better than the Steelers in every way. Ben Roethlisberger is aging. He's getting worse. They have Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, but does that really matter? How far does that go? How far will that go? With a terrible quarterback that's still playing, he's good enough. But Tyrod Taylor is a better quarterback. Another unpopular opinion there. But with LaShawn McCoy and Tyrod Taylor both being running threats, and the fact that Tyrod Taylor is getting better year after year, and he can throw the ball, he doesn't have amazing receivers, but he doesn't need them. As long as they can catch the ball, it's okay. As long as they're fast, it's okay. A theme with the Bills is quickness. They're quick. They're a quick team. Yeah, and I think that they can beat the Steelers. I think that they will move on. And on the other side, I think that it'll be the Jaguars and the Broncos. The Jaguars are such a surprisingly good team. Nobody could have predicted that they would be this amazing. But they are very good this year. I'm not saying that they're even, like, they don't even have that good of an offense. They have Leonard Fournette, and that's about it. But Leonard Fournette seems to be all you need on that team. I mean, seriously. With their great defense and just a really good running game, they don't need any passing. Blake Bortles is still a very bad quarterback, but he's good enough. Because as long as you have Leonard Fournette and you can throw the ball to Allen Hurns or Marquise Lee once in a while, they can definitely win their division. Texans are also a good team, but I think that the Jaguars are better. And I think that the Broncos are like the Jaguars too. They're very similar to the Jaguars, but they have a better offense. Trevor Siemian is doing surprisingly well this year, and Emmanuel Sanders is still great. They still have C.J. Anderson. They're like the Jaguars, but a little more complete. And with a better defense, which is saying a lot because the Jaguars have the second best defense in the league. And if they were to face each other in the wildcard game, it would be a battle of the defenses. And just going a little faster, I think that the Broncos can beat the Patriots. The Patriots are just looking a lot more incomplete this year. There's no necessary point that makes them worse, but they just look worse in some way. And, of course, the Chiefs are going to beat the Bills. And between the division rivals, the Chiefs and the Broncos, I think that the Broncos can win. I think that the Chiefs are going to have the better record, but I think that the Broncos are still a better team. That's just my opinion. And in the NFC, just going over this a little quickly, I think the Saints will be the 3 seed. And I don't want to say that. I really don't want to say that. Because that division is going to be bad. That division is going to have a 9-7 division winner. Whoever it is. But I'm still putting the Saints as the 3 seed. Because I think that they're just better. And the other team, the Rams, who I'm putting as the 4 seed, will be just as good. 9-7 and division winners. Both teams will be like that. And the other 2 teams, they will be just as good, if not better, being the Lions and the Redskins, as the 5 and 6 seeds, respectively. I think that's going to be how it plays out. So in the Saints-Redskins game, I think that the Saints will win. The Redskins are disappointing this year. They're not bad, but they're disappointing. The Saints are also more of a disappointing team, but they're still better. Both teams are disappointing, but I still think that they can both make the NFL postseason, and I think that the Saints will win, with them facing the Vikings, which will be the 1 seed, and in the other game with the Rams and the Lions, like I said earlier, the Rams are going to be a weird division winner, along with the Saints. 9-7 they're going to win. Jared Goff is a weirdly alright quarterback. And I say weirdly because there are some games where he's really good. He throws 10 touchdowns. Not 10, of course, but a lot of touchdowns. In other games where he just gives the ball to Todd Gurley and doesn't do anything else. That's all the Rams really need. They have Todd Gurley and they have some offensive weapons. But I think the Lions are better. Matthew Stafford has gone to the postseason year after year, and I think that he can beat the Lions. I mean, the Rams, not the Lions. That'd be beating himself. Yeah, but I think that the Lions are a better team anyway. Because, like I said, with the NBA segment, there's something about experience that just really matters. And I think that's going to pull through for the Lions against the Rams. Because the Rams are still extremely inexperienced, though they may be pretty good now. The Lions would be facing the Eagles, which would be the 2 seed. And I think that both the Vikings and the Eagles would win their respective games. And this is where I'm not really sure. The Vikings and the Eagles are both the best teams in the NFC, if you ask me. But both teams have their problems that can really hurt them down the line. The Eagles have troubles with Carson Wentz. Last year, Carson Wentz looked so good early on, but then he just kind of fell apart, and you don't know if that can happen in the postseason or just the regular season. And the Vikings also have quarterback issues and running back issues. There are a lot of injuries with them, and I said that the Vikings will pull out on top, but the Eagles could very well do that too. Anyway, I think that the Broncos will win the Super Bowl, and I think that depending on the team, I think that either way, it'll be with about a score of 27-14. That's just how I feel about that. And the Broncos have such a good defense that really, if they can just get past the Jaguars, they will be good. Now, I say that, but you may be thinking, wait a second. You're saying that it's going to be a bigger deal if they get past the Jaguars than it will if they get past the Patriots. Yes. The Jaguars are a surprisingly good team. The thing about the Jaguars is they have a defense almost matching of the Broncos. The important thing is if Trevor Siemian can get past the Jaguars defense. If he can do that, then that'll have them set. That'll have them set for the rest of the NFL postseason. And the same can apply to the Jaguars. If the Jaguars can beat the Broncos, then I think that could happen too. Can the Jaguars beat the Patriots? Maybe. Does that mean they will? No. The Broncos can beat the Patriots too. That same logic applies to them. So I think maybe the most important game of the NFL postseason, which isn't actually the Super Bowl, will be the game between the Jaguars and the Broncos. If that does happen, this is just my speculation after all. So if that does happen, then that would definitely be the most important game. Because very well, if the Jaguars could get past the Broncos, there is a clear chance they could make the Super Bowl because of all the teams kind of being on equal planes, very unlike the NBA postseason. And with that, it looks like that'll do it for this edition of the Payoff Pitch. Make sure to check us out on TuneIn Radio and subscribe to us on YouTube at Clark Montessori. Also, follow us on Twitter at Soko Club, and from me, Joey Olberding, I hope you stay tuned to 95.7 MRC for more Payoff Pitch and so much more.